Part 1. Mr. Nietzsche. So let's leave Mr. Nietzsche and go on. Gay Science. 1. I live, if I choose to see things this way, among a curious race that sees Earth, its chance events and the vast interconnectedness of animals, mammals, and insects, not so much in relation to themselves, or the necessities limiting them, but in relation to the unlimited, lost, and unintelligible aspects of the skies. Theoretically, for us happy beings, Mr. Nietzsche is a secondary problem, though here exists. It's obvious such happy beings aren't that much in evidence, I must quickly add. Except for a few exceptions, my company on earth is mostly Nietzsche. Blake or Rimbaud are ponderous and touchy. Proust's limitation is his innocence, his ignorance of the winds that blow from the outside. Nietzsche is the only one to support me. He says, we. If community doesn't exist, Mr. Nietzsche is a philosopher. If from the death of God, he says, speaking to me, we don't fashion a major renunciation and perpetual victory over ourselves, we'll have to pay for that loss, the will to power. That sentence has a meaning. I immediately saw what it was driving at. We can't rely on anything, except ourselves. Ludicrous responsibility devolves on us, overwhelms us. In every regard, right up to the present, people always have relied on each other, or God. As I write, I hear rolling thunder, moaning wind. I am watching within me, sensing noise, explosions, storms moving across the land over time, in an unlimited time, unlimited sky, traversed by crashing roars, dispensing death as simply as the heart pumps blood. I feel myself borne away in sharp impulses, too violent for me right now. Through the shutters, into my window, comes an infinite wind, carrying with it unleashed struggles, raging disasters of the ages. And don't I, too, carry within me a blood rage? A blindness satisfied by the hunger to mete out blows? How I would enjoy being a pure snarl of hatred, demanding death. The upshot being no prettier than two dogs going at it tooth and nail, though I am tired and feverish. Now the air all around is alive with the heat, earth breathing a fiery breath. Now everyone walks naked, the good and the bad side by side. And for those in love with knowledge, it's a celebration. The will to power. The profoundest thinkers aren't those whose stars orbit cyclical pathways. To those who see inside themselves, as if into the immense universe, and who in themselves bear Milky Ways, the extreme irregularity of these constellations is well known. They lead directly to chaos and to a labyrinthine existence. Gay Science. 2. An unlucky incident gives me a feeling of sin. I don't have any right to run out of luck. Breaking the moral law was necessary to experience that urgency. Compared to the strictness of this attitude, wasn't the old morality simple? Now begins a difficult and unrelenting journey, the quest for the most distant possibility. The idea of a morality that couldn't conquer the possible beyond good, wouldn't such an idea be ridiculous? To deny worth, but to do what surpasses all praise, or, for that matter, understanding, the will to power. If we want to create, we have to credit ourselves with much more freedom than previously was given us, and thus free ourselves of morality and bring liveliness to our celebrations. Intimations of the future, to celebrate the future and not the past, to invent the myth of this future, to live in hopefulness. Blessed moments. But then let the curtain fall, and let us bring our thinking back to solid goals near at hand. the will to power. The future, not a prolonging of the self through time, but the occurrence of surpassing, going further than the limits reached. 3. The heights where you find him link him in friendship to recluses, to the unrecognized of all times. 1882 to 85. Recluses among recluses, where will we be then? Since it is certainly the case that that's where, because of science, we'll someday be. Where will human companions be found? It used to be we would look for a king, father, a judge for us all, since we needed authentic kings, fathers, judges. Later on, we'll seek a friend, since human beings will have become splendid autonomous systems, though remaining alone. Mythological instinct will then go looking for a friend. The will to power. We'll make philosophy a dangerous thing, change the idea of it, teach a philosophy that is dangerous to life. What better service can be rendered to philosophy? The more expensive the idea, the more it will be cherished. If we unhesitatingly sacrifice ourselves to notions of God, country, and freedom, and if all of history is the smoke surrounding this kind of sacrifice, how can we show the primacy of the concept of philosophy over popular concepts like God, country, and freedom, except by making the former more expensive than the latter, showing that it demands still greater hecatombs? The will to power. If it were ever entertained, this proposal might prove interesting. With no one in the offing wanting to die for it, however, Nietzsche's doctrine is null and void. If I ever have occasion to write out my last words in blood, I'll write this. Everything I lived, said, or wrote, everything I loved, I considered communication. How could I live my life otherwise? Living this recluse's life, speaking in a desert of isolated readers, accepting the buoyant touch of writing. My accomplishment, its sum total, is to have taken risks and to have my sentences fall like the victims of war now lying in the fields. I want people to laugh, shrug their shoulders, and say, he's having fun at our expense. He's alive. True, I live on. Even now I am full of life, though I declare, if you find me reluctant to take risks in this book, throw it away. If, on the other hand, when you read me, you find nothing to risk yourself, then listen. Throughout your life, up until your death, your reading will only corrupt you, and you'll stink with corruption. The type of my disciples. For any of those in whom I take an interest, I wish only suffering, abandonment, sickness, ill-treatment, and disgrace. I don't want them spared the profound contempt for self or the martyrdom that is mistrust of self. They haven't stirred me to pity. The will to power. Nothing human necessitates a community of those desiring humanness. Anything taking us down that road will require combined efforts, or at least continuity from one person to the next, not limiting ourselves to the possibilities of a single person. To cut my ties with what surrounds me makes this solitude of mine a mistake. A life is only a link in the chain. I want other people to continue the experience begun by those before me and dedicate themselves, like me and the others before me, to this, to go to the furthest reaches of the possible. Sentences will be consigned to museums if the emptiness in writing persists. Currently, we take pride in this, that nothing can be understood till first of all deformed, emptied of content, by one of two mechanisms, propaganda and writing. Like a woman, possibility makes demands, makes a person go all the way. Strolling with art lovers through the galleries and across the polished wooden floors in the Museum of Possibilities, inside of us we eventually kill off whatever isn't grossly political, confining it to sumptuous, dated, and labeled illusions. Only when shame brings this home to us do we realize it. To live out possibility to the utmost means many will have to change, taking it on as something outside of them, no longer depending on any one of them. Nietzsche never doubted that if the possibility he recommended was going to exist, it would require community. Desire for community was constantly on his mind. He wrote, "Intimacy with great thinking is unbearable. I seek and call out to those to whom I can communicate such thinking without bringing about their deaths. Without finding them, he sought souls who would be deep enough. He had to resign himself, content himself with saying, when a challenge like this rises from the soul's depths, not to hear the sound of a reply is a terrifying experience, and possibly even the most tenacious perish from it. It freed me from my ties with living men." Numerous observations express his suffering. You're preparing for a time when you'll have to speak. Perhaps at that point you will be ashamed of speaking, just as you sometimes are of writing. You may still have to interpret yourself. And is it possible your actions and abstentions won't suffice to communicate yourself? There will come a cultural era in which to read at all will be construed as bad taste. There will be no reason to blush when you are read in that future age, while at present, when you are called a writer, you are insulted, and whoever praises you on account of your stories reveals a lack of tact, creating a gap between you and him. And it never crosses your mind that this glorification is in fact humiliation. I know what the present-day condition of the reader's soul is, but beware of your wish to expend efforts on that state, to go to any trouble to produce it. Men who possess a destiny, those who by going forth take on a destiny, the whole breed of relentless drudges. Oh, don't they long for rest now and then? They yearn for the strong hearts and sturdy necks that, for a few hours at least, take away the weight pressing down upon them. But how vain that desire! They wait, and nothing of what takes place around them responds to their attention. No one comes to meet them with even the smallest portion of their own suffering and excitement. No one suspects what they put into their writing. Finally, further along, they learn this elementary bit of wisdom: stop waiting. And a second lesson: be congenial, be modest, take everything in stride. That is, be a bit more relaxed than has been the case up to now. The will to power. My life with Nietzsche as a companion is a community. My book is this community. I take the following few lines very much to heart. I don't desire to become a saint. I prefer being taken for a fool. And perhaps I am a fool. But all the same, though not all the same, since nothing has ever been as deceptive as a saint, the truth speaks from my mouth. I am not about to rip masks off anyone. What do we, in fact, know about Mr. Nietzsche? Constrained to sickness and silence, loathing the Christians, and we won't mention the others. And then, there are so few of us. 4. Nothing speaks as vividly to our hearts as these sprightly melodies with their absolute sadness. 1888. You blame this sovereign spirit, a spirit that for the present suffices unto itself. You blame it for being well protected, for being fortified against sudden attack. You blame it for the walls surrounding it, for the mysteries within it, though still you glance curiously through the golden bars that surround its domain, fascinated and interested. For the hints of unknown perfumes are drifting mockingly across your face, disclosing something of the secret gardens and delights. The will to power. There is a false appearance of cheer against which nothing can be done, but adopting it, one has to be finally satisfied with it. We who have taken refuge in happiness, who in a certain sense need the noon and its wild excesses of sunlight, who sit by the edge of the road to watch life go by like a procession of masqueraders, or a drama wherein we go mad, doesn't it appear that we're aware of our fear of something? Something in us breaks easily. Do we fear youthful and destructive hands? Is it to avoid chance that we take refuge in life, in its brilliance, in its falsity and superficiality, in its shiny lies? If we seem light-hearted, is it from being infinitely sad? We are serious because we know something of the abyss. And is this why we erect barriers to that seriousness? We laugh within ourselves at those with a taste for melancholy, whom we suspect of lacking depth. Alas, we envy them as we deride them, since we aren't happy enough to allow them their delicate misery. We're compelled to flee the barest hints of sadness. Our hell and our darkness are always too near. There is something we know that we dread, something we don't want to be on good terms with. The lathe we have makes us tremble. Its murmurings cause us to grow pale. And those who don't believe in that faith seem happy to us. We turn aside from the sight of misery, stop our ears to the lamentations of suffering, and pity would break us if we didn't have the secret of toughening ourselves. Stay with us in your courage, O you mocking indifference. Cool us, ye winds blowing from the glaciers. We'll no longer take things to heart. We're choosing as our supreme God and Redeemer the mask, the will to power. The supreme cosmic discourse, I am cruelty, trickery, etc., etc., mocking our fear of assuming responsibility for mistakes, mocking a creator, or for any pain, more malicious than ever before, etc. This is a supreme way of taking pleasure in our own work, wrecking it so as to be able to construct it again and again. It's a new triumph over death, pain, obliteration. The will to power. Be sure, from now on I will take interest only in necessity. Be sure, amor fati will be my supreme love. There exists the possibility you'll go that far, though first you will have to show some interest in the Furies, and I declare that their serpents make me hesitate. What do you know about the Furies? The Furies, isn't that just a derogatory name for the Graces? He's out of his mind. The will to power. Indicating the power and confidence obtained by showing that I've unlearned fear. In place of mistrust and doubt, trust our instincts. Each person loving and honoring himself or herself in wisdom and even absurdity, partly as a fool, partly as a god, not being a figure of woe, or an owl, or a serpent. The will to power. 5. What was the greatest sin at that point? Wasn't it the phrase uttered by the person who said, "Woe unto those who laugh while on this earth"? Zarathustra, on the Superman. Friedrich Nietzsche had always wanted to write a classical work, a history book, a system, a poem, something worthy of the old Hellenes he chose as masters. He never had been able to give form to that ambition. At the end of 1883, he had just completed an almost desperate undertaking, and the abundance and importance of these notes allow us to have some sense about the greatness of a work that remained utterly in vain. He could not provide his moral ideas with any foundation, nor could he write his tragic poem. As the two books were frustrated, his hopes disappeared. What was he? An unfortunate, capable only of short efforts, lyric songs, cries. Daniel Halévy. In 1872, he sent Mademoiselle Meysenburg his incomplete series of lectures on the future of the universities. "They make me terribly thirsty," he said, "but alas, they offer nothing to drink." The same words could be applied to his poem. Halévy.